I also wanted to engage with a question from the audience, from our listeners. Randy asked, what are your expectations going into prayer?
That's a good question. Do you want to answer first, or do you want me to answer?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and answer that question to
Uh,
start?
for, for me, my expectation is to be pulled in closer to God. Because, like I had mentioned before, sometimes I have my own agenda, and I never want to limit God to what my understanding of who He is, or what my understanding of what the situation is. So for me, my expectation is that I would grow closer to Him. I would gain wisdom and understanding so that I could intercede for myself or the people around me. So that's my hope when I go to prayer, is that I will have a spiritual change that'll draw me closer to Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And Randy, I'd love to hear maybe what your expectations are in prayer if you do. And for other folks who are listening, if you'd like to share with us what your expectations are going into prayer. One of the things that I was curious about in kind of thinking about this too was how important is, when you're talking about your expectations, is specificity. Because I noticed, and I feel like when I was younger, it was very clear, like, get me this job, get me this thing, get me that thing. And then, but in hearing your expectations, I heard a lot more kind of like, like, help me be kind, help me be, like, and to me, I feel like that's a bigger, like, and less specific kind of,
Yeah.
guess, like hope. And why is that? Or why that and not specifics? Or do you have both? Or,
I think there's a balance in that. As I've matured and understood more about who God is, and as my faith has grown in who He is in my life, I've realized that I'm not as smart as I think I am. And as much as I think that I know what my desires are and what I was created for, I'm realizing that that's not necessarily the case. Because some of the opportunities that I would have prayed for myself to have are opportunities, and I look back, that wouldn't have been fulfilling for my life.
yeah.
And so to have limited um, the opportunity to receive from God those things would have been a limiting factor in my life. So when I was younger, when I was a baby Christian or new in my faith, I prayed for those kinds of things.
Hmm.
And now I pray for, the opportunities that God has laid out for me, and that I wouldn't be single-minded or single-centered, that I would desire one thing that's tangible in the world over something greater that God might have for me. So that just the posture and the surrender of my prayer, because when I'm dictating what I want versus allowing God to choose what I want, it's a trust factor for me.
Yeah.
I'm trusting you to know those things that you've already put in place for me, to know those things that you already have for me, and it's better than what I want for myself. And so I'm just trusting you to dictate that, and to give me the courage and the strength to walk through this if it looks different than what I think it should.
Mhm.
And so for me, that's the change in my own prayer life, and I believe other folks are having that same transition as they mature in their
Yeah.
faith.
I've definitely had a little bit more. That's definitely been my experience, that I've gotten to a point where, like, in my life where it is more of the ambiguous things. Like, I don't, like, I feel like I've been able to create, if you will, and do all the things that's possible for me to do. And there's so much more to life that I want to experience that's beyond what I have experienced already, or even possibly my understanding of what I could experience. There's so many times over my life when something's happened for me or with me, or that I've gotten to do that was not something that I would have like sought out to do or prayed for or even thought I wanted, but actually ended up being like really fantastic and something that like I was so grateful for. And so I think in having those experiences so often, it kind of caught me thinking, well, what more am I maybe missing out on? Or
Mm-hmm.
because I think I know I can get kind of a tunnel vision where it's like, even if it's like, I want to be kind at work, then maybe I'm just at work, I'm trying to be kind, I'm trying to be kind, I'm trying to be kind. But then I'm like a jerk at the grocery store or with my family, or you know what I mean? Because I'm kind of like just in
Yeah,
that mode of looking, how can I be kind in this setting instead of like, how can I be kind everywhere? Or,
yeah.
things like that. And Randy is saying, I prayed for 5 years to heal my wife, expecting healing. I should have been more specific in my prayers be healed on earth.
Mm.
Mm. Oh, that like
Yeah. Yeah.
breaks my
Yeah.
heart.
Yeah.
Breaks my
Randy, I
heart.
so appreciate you engaging with us. And I miss your wife also. Um, and yeah, I don't know. I believe that, and I know you believe this too, that she's right where God would want her to be. I can't imagine how earth shattering that is for you. And I pray for you a lot because I can't imagine. I just know how I would feel if I was in the same situation. And, I don't know if a specific prayer would have changed God's plan for your wife or not. But I know that you're going to see her again. So praise God that you're here, that you're still serving and chasing after Him and asking the hard questions because I believe God will answer your prayer and it give you understanding potentially in all this.
Yeah, well, and see, and I think this is where like I am really challenged with God or with my understanding of God growing up to where I am now. Like I have a really hard time believing in a God that intervenes in like like in that way that I would say like I pray for something and it's going to happen. Um, which is also why sometimes I think I struggle with prayer too, because
Hmm.
um, I sometimes I feel like prayer is more for me than it is for God, and it's not about like having God do for me um, something, but more of helping me to kind of put out into the world my intention and kind of saying it out loud or forming it or reminding myself in a way so that when I move out into the world, I can bring that idea or that intention or God um, in that process while I go through it, not in the idea that God is actually going to necessarily do something because there's so many like horrible things that happen um, with this God that's all powerful and mighty, and it's beyond more than I can understand. But like
Hmm.
for me, I struggle with that because I've had a number of experiences and witnessed so many things that I just cannot understand how this could happen in God's world, so to speak. And so for me, I struggle a little bit with prayer in that sense of like this idea of, yeah, it might be to a God or to a higher power or something like that, but it's like, do I have faith or trust that it's going to do anything beyond what I'm able to do? And yet there is, but it's, to me, it's more of like a collect, like God to me is kind of like all of like within all of us and is connected with all of us. So it's not always even what I'm doing, but it is something that we're doing here on earth. I don't know. I still have a hard time, like, I think with all that. And so I think that also might be why my prayer life is, um, I don't know. It is what it is, versus being something different because I do have that challenge with
Yeah.
oftentimes I'm like, because I'm not a Christian or because I'm not whatever, like I'm like, who am I even praying to? What am I even praying to? And sometimes to have something that I'm praying to almost limits my expectation on that thing for
Yeah.
whatever reason. And so almost having a more just out into the universe kind of thing feels a little bit more like there's less expectation. There's less room for maybe disappointment in that this higher being like is failing me or something, you know?
Well, do you think God or this higher being should be someone that should just do what we want them to do?
I don't think I don't believe in a God that works that way, but I believe that I'm more in the sense of like there's a like we're like there's a oneness with us all. And so God is not me, um, but God is like, or a higher power sense, or even like the power of God is like me plus you, or me plus the world, everyone in the world, and that sort of thing is God. Like the all of that energy and all that stuff is like creation or whatever, and that's God. And so that's what I struggle with, because I'm like, how do
Mm.
you really impact that? And we do, and then in some ways we actually have more power of impacting something like that in some ways, but there are some things that are just going to happen that don't make any sense. But it's hard to believe. It's hard when you can believe that there's like some person or some thing that's like, okay, that's going to happen over there, that's not going to happen over there, you know what I mean? Like, that's not
Mm.
how it works. But I think, or that hasn't been my experience in how it works, and I don't think that people perceive it that way. But it's hard to think of some sort of relationship to something, authority, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
that's not about that.
That's interesting. We just have a view. You know, I believe that I do have a creator, a God, that is all knowing. I believe that He extends the time and space of this earth, and I
Mhm.
believe that He has the sovereignty to manifest things in and through my life. I believe I was created and born for a purpose, orchestrated by Him, and He allows me the free will to fulfill that purpose or to not fulfill that purpose. And if I desire to fulfill that purpose, that's when I spend that time with Him to understand. Now, I also feel like my purpose really has nothing to do with me or my own life. It's my ability. It's my purpose to be an ambassador of God, which is, you know, my Bible tells me God is love, God is patient, God is kind. He's not self-serving. He's not, you know. So these are things that I aspire to, and those are the things I surrender to when I pray. Lord, I desire to develop these things in myself so that I can be those things and be your hands and your feet to people. In the instance that Randy is talking about, when we're asking for something specific, you know, we see all through the pages of scriptures that people were healed. And it's hard to understand why God would heal not in this life, but in the next. So I can't imagine how what Randy must be going through. But I have prayed for people that have not received healing, and it took me a while to understand why it would work in one situation and what why it wouldn't in others. And the truth of it was is that God's purpose for people is different. There are things that God allows us to walk through based on decisions that we've made. There are things that He allows us to walk through so that He can draw us closer to Him, so we can build trust and build our ability to hear from Him and to be used by Him. So there's a lot of factors. And so over time, I've learned that for me not to have an agenda, I need to love the people around me no matter what they're walking through, pray for the people no matter what they're walking through, and pray the word of God over them. And know, because I love Jesus, and if that person that I'm praying over loves Jesus, know that if they don't get healed in this time where I can have a tangible relationship with them, we are promised that we're going to have an eternity with them. And so that's where my hope lies. So, but it's not an easy place to be. And when my pops passed away, I struggled with that. But I know my pop's going to be in heaven. So I look forward to the day that I get to see him there.
Yeah. And Randy says, love the conversation. Thank you for your perspective.